Welcome back. Well, tonight we're joined by Jeggan Grey-Johnson, the Africa Policy Advisor from the Open Society Foundations, a seasoned voice in human rights advocacy, reparative justice and governance. We now look to delve into the OSF's Africa tour and how Namibia's unique moment and its first female president reflects broader movements for equity, reparation and multilateral reform. Mr. Johnson, good evening and thank you so much for joining us here on the Daily Roundup.
Thank you very much for having me.
Well, to dive right into it, this year's event in Windhoek is taking place under the theme Understanding Namibia. So what informed the OFS's decision to spotlight Namibia in this moment in time?
Well, OSF, Open Society Foundations, had embarked on a tour of Africa. We call it the Africa Tour 2005, Senegal, Kenya, and South Africa, and Namibia being the last country that we'll be visiting in this last leg of the tour. And it's interesting because all the other countries that I've named have we have an office there, we've got a presence there, but Namibia really is a novelty to us in the sense that we sense a great deal of optimism. We see opportunity in terms of aiding state and non-state actors in some of the objectives and the priorities that they have in harnessing sound democratic practice, good governance, transparency, accountability, and just general popular participation, which is really the cornerstone of a functioning, robust democratic system of governance, whereby citizenry processes are taken seriously and promoted.
Talk to us about how Namibia's election of its first female president, Mr. Johnson, reflects larger, shifts on the continent regarding gender as well as governance.
Well, I think certainly the country is ushering in of an era of women leading in the highest offices. Not only highest office, but offices is a reality now, particularly given the fact, as you so rightly pointed out, that Namibia is, now at this point in time, is the only country, and possibly the only country in Africa, but possibly the only country in the world to have a president and vice president who are women. We believe that this is a welcome development and an inspiration to many, especially the young women and girls who can be inspired that the glass ceiling in public service can be broken after many decades of coming so close and yet so far in this singular aspiration. And Namibia is clearly a living testimony of these possibilities and what our future trajectories actually mean for inclusivity, for equity, and also for women political leadership on the African continent.
Mm-hmm. Well, the theme, the promise of participation, I've seen has been a recurring theme throughout the conference in terms of the program that I've looked at. In your view, what does true participation look like in context shaped by, historical trauma such as Namibia's colonial past?
Well, I think certainly in terms of Namibia's colonial past, and also in terms of Namibia's uniqueness in this issue of addressing injustices that were basically perpetrated or meted out on the Namibian people, whether it's through the colonial era, whether it's through apartheid, or even in some instances way before that, slavery to a certain degree as well. Namibia also stands to be the only country that has really, litigated and argued, advocated, and gotten some decent results that point to the way as to how other African countries can actually elevate the issues of reparations. Especially given the fact that 2025 is the year that the African Union has declared the year of reparations for for Africans and people of Africa's descent. And Namibia is the only country that has managed to get so far in this reparations agenda, in basically securing acknowledgement, securing the fact that there will be, reparative justice moving forward, and the fact that also at this point in time there are negotiations afoot. But I think also in terms of participation, this cannot only be necessarily about the government or the state parties themselves, because it's inherently about a people-driven factor. And I think the participatory process is something that everybody that's been watching this is eager to basically see come on board and to be strengthened. So, we're hopeful that the issues of popular participation within this, not only for the victims and with the victims, about the victims, but those that advocate on their behalf as well.
Well, as you rightfully mentioned, Namibia is positioning itself as a leader in, international justice. So how is the OSF supporting countries such as Namibia to take on these global challenges, such as restitution, when it comes to land reform and genocide recognition?
I think it even goes beyond that. Certainly, the reparations elements and restitution is extremely important, is vitally important. And I think Namibia is becoming a respected voice on the international stage through its quest to uphold the principles of international justice, human rights, and further, amplifying Africa's global voice and punching above its weight. And I think this is commendable, particularly given, again, broader than the reparations issue. Namibia has led the way. The courageous stance that is taken on the International Court of Justice on advocating for the affirmation of the rights of Palestinians, for example, to be respected, for peace to reign in Gaza. I think that is vitally commendable, especially in this era of uncertainty, in this era of polarity that we're seeing. I think Namibia certainly punching above its weight, leading the SADC region in its quest for justice, and basically, amplifying those calls on behalf of others that aren't able to do that. But also, more importantly, putting its hand up and saying that I could be a leader in this particular thematic focus area in basically ensuring that rights are respected, not only for certain people, but for everybody.
The African Union has declared 2025 the Year of Justice, as you mentioned earlier, for Africans and people of African descent. So how do you envision this year, transforming the conversation around reparations, both within Africa and globally?
Well, I think certainly the issue of the reparations is an issue that is long overdue for African people and people of African ancestry on the reparations element. I mean, the theme is, yes, it's timely. We're happy that it's been elevated and recognized as such for the year 2025. Precisely because, again, it calls for unity with Africans and the African diaspora to advocate for justice, equity, and redress, as you rightly mentioned. But we still believe that such an ambition is long-term. And I think Namibia has led the way, as I said, in this moral ask. And as an AU member state, thus far being the only one to have basically secured at least the addressing of these historical injustices. But I think it goes further than that. Namibia can be a champion to basically at least lead the way in terms of ensuring that this theme is not only a theme, it's actually, in reality, it's a reparations agenda that basically encompasses the entire African continent and the African people. And it must be recognized that it cannot be only about an event or a set of events in 2025. It has to go beyond that. And going beyond that, we need champions such as Namibia and other countries that are respected within the African continent to put their hand up, or keep putting their hands up in Namibia's case, to say that we will basically take the leadership of that, because it is too important for it now to be left to falter. Once the call has been made, the commitments have been made, decisions have been made at the levels of the assemblies of the heads of state in Addis, we need to follow through on some of those commitments. And I think Namibia is also uniquely placed to basically take us through and navigate some of these very, very uncharted waters that is going to be in front of us as a continent and also as individual states.
Well, on to the program for the next 2 days. You can briefly tell us what's expected. I do know that youth voices were central in the opening panel that took place earlier today. So what strategies do you believe are most effective in ensuring young people aren't just heard, but are also actively shaping policy and democratic processes?
I mean, the future of Africa are the young people. The statistics and the data points towards that. So as a result, I think it is important for certain fundamentals to start being put in place. First of all, stop treating youth as just tokenistic constituents, whereby when you need them for elections to campaign for you, they are vital, they are important, but when you need to put them into positions of power, the talk is that they're not experienced enough yet. And interestingly enough, I think for Namibia, we had the Minister of Information, Communications and Technology come in today to close the meeting for the first day. And she happens to be, if not the youngest, one of the youngest ministers on the African continent. It's gratifying that, Namibia is actually, following through not only in policy, but in practice, in ensuring that the voice of the youth and elements of full participation at the highest public service level or the highest political levels in terms of leadership is being realized. We hope that, again, other countries are able to, follow suit on some of these things. Yes, some countries are doing it, but certainly it is also quite worrying, given the fact that if you look at the average age of African leaders on the African continent, there's a huge gap, and there's an intergenerational disparity as far as, again, the ones that are leading African member states and those that are being led. So again, we are hoping that through dialogue, intergenerational, through, again, experience sharing, and also through mutual respect and support, we should be able to basically move along and look at a new generation of leaders to basically tackle a new set of challenges that we are facing, and basically chart a path, of course, of a new direction as to basically how we'll be able to move together in unison.
Well, finally, Mr. Johnson, as someone who's deeply involved in shaping, continental policy advocacy, what gives you hope right now when you look at countries such as Namibia and the broader African landscape?
Hope is a very interesting thing, and I'm glad that you brought that up, because today I talked a little bit about that. I mean, I think in terms of expectation, and there are two levels to expectation. There's unrealistic expectations, and there are expectations that are not only justified, but that are attainable and that are realistic. I think a country like Namibia, especially given the novelties that we're seeing in terms of the women political leadership that we're seeing, the changes that we're seeing, also youth involvement and participation in the processes, which I've just answered to the two questions that you asked me. There's also, an element of, new economic opportunities, and just given, the richness and the vastness of resources that Namibia holds, it is, a potential for serious transformation. Particularly given the fact that the country is not very populous. It has a vast land and reserves beneath that land. How you utilize it, what are you going to do forward as far as priorities are concerned is important. And it's interesting that Her Excellency, the President, in her inaugural speech, actually, prioritized and mapped out some of these priorities as to how she's going to go about doing this. And for us, as Open Society Foundations, we've always been ready to basically stretch out our hand in partnership, as I said, to basically assist where we can to strengthen the priorities of state actors in terms of reforms, in terms of strengthening sound democratic practice, governance, and participation, as well as also non-state actors that are in a position and are willing and see it as a priority to also accompany the state in some of these ambitions. And sometimes, that journey is a difficult one, and it's also fraught with disagreements. Democracy is a noisy enterprise. And really, the best form of that is, again, it's a marketplace of ideas. And we're ready to basically invest in those ideas and in that particular marketplace.
Mr. Jeggan Grey-Johnson, thank you so much for your time this evening, and thank you for joining us here on the Daily Roundup.
Thank you very much for having me.
Well, when we come back after this brief break, our conversations here on the Daily Roundup does continue, so do stay with us.